NASA detected a mysterious object.
NASA-funded ATLAS survey. The brightness that we see is partially due to the size of the object.
3IATLAS will pass within 29 million kilometers.
72 hours, 2 naked-eye novae, twin magnitude 6 earthquakes, and a solar eruption striking an interstellar comet. Scientists are calling it the rarest convergence of cosmic and earthly forces in living memory. The impossible week. Imagine the universe keeping time with a clock of its own, one whose hands move not in seconds, but in centuries. In that vast rhythm, most weeks pass without note. But in late September 2025, the clock struck differently. Over just 72 hours, Earth and sky seemed to conspire. In Venezuela, the ground tore apart with force enough to topple buildings. Above, 2 faint stars suddenly blazed into naked-eye visibility, each a white dwarf erupting in runaway fusion. And at the same moment, millions of kilometers away, the sun hurled a storm of charged particles directly into the path of an interstellar comet, the rarest kind of visitor we have ever known. To some scientists, it felt like coincidence taken to the edge of believability. To others, it was a once-in-a-generation natural experiment, a chance to study 3 separate extremes of nature stacked into the same narrow window of time. How do you explain it? Was this just chance, or are we glimpsing deeper patterns that only reveal themselves when nature's forces align? To answer that, we need to go back to the discovery that first set this cascade in motion, a comet that came not from our own solar system, but from the stars. A visitor from the stars, 3IATLAS. On the 1st of July, 2025, astronomers scanning the southern skies with the ATLAS survey telescope in Chile noticed something strange. Against the familiar drift of local comets and asteroids, one object refused to follow the script. Its orbit was not elliptical, curving back toward the sun, as most icy wanderers do. It was hyperbolic, tilted sharply retrograde, slicing through the solar system at over 60 kilometers per second. Within days, calculations confirmed what many hoped and few expected. This was an interstellar visitor, the third ever detected after Oumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019. Its name was given accordingly, 3IATLAS. For scientists, the discovery was electric. Here was matter forged in another star system, untouched by our sun's 4.5 billion years of shaping. Every trace of dust, every volatile molecule evaporating from its surface, carried whispers of a distant birthplace. And unlike Oumuamua, whose brief and puzzling passage left more questions than answers, or Borisov, which was faint and fast, Atlas arrived with timing that seemed almost uncanny. The solar cycle was surging toward its peak, the sun restless with flares and storms. Planetary scientists realized this comet would not simply drift quietly past. Its path carried it near Mars, onward toward a close approach to the sun itself, and directly through a gauntlet of the most turbulent solar weather in more than a decade. In effect, nature had handed humanity a probe, one not built in a laboratory but traveling from the stars, ready to be tested against the raw power of our sun. What no one foresaw was how quickly that test would come, and how violently other forces would align as the comet drew nearer. The first shock, 2 naked-eye novae. Long before seismographs shook and solar plasma raced toward the comet, the first signs of something extraordinary came from the stars themselves. On September 23, 2025, a quiet point of light in the constellation, Centaurus suddenly surged. What had once required a telescope to glimpse now burned brightly enough for anyone standing beneath a dark sky to see with the naked eye. Astronomers quickly identified it as Vman 935 Centauri, a white dwarf that had stolen gas from its nearby companion until the pressure ignited a runaway fusion reaction. In a matter of hours, it had outshone 1 billion suns, flaring into view as a nova. Such events are rare, typically happening once every year or 2 across the entire sky. But what happened next unsettled even veteran observers. Less than 48 hours later, another outburst appeared, this time from Sagittarius. The star V7994 Sagittarii lit up in the same explosive fashion, erupting with the signature shock waves of a nova. 2 naked-eye novae within 3 days is an occurrence so unlikely that many astronomers privately admitted they had never expected to witness it in their lifetimes. Beyond the data charts and magnitude curves, there was also something profoundly human about these eruptions. For as long as cultures have recorded the night sky, sudden new stars have been seen as omens, events that seem to rewrite the heavens themselves. In September 2025, modern astronomers found themselves standing in the same shoes as their ancestors, looking up at familiar constellations now marked by strange new lights. Only this time, the mystery would deepen because the ground beneath their feet was about to shift. The ground trembles, Venezuelan earthquakes. While astronomers were still absorbing the shock of 2 sudden novae, the Earth itself delivered its own jolt. On the evening of September 24th, residents of Zulia State in northwestern Venezuela felt the ground buckle beneath them. A magnitude 6.2 earthquake struck near Mena Grande, shallow enough to send violent tremors racing through towns and villages. Lights flickered, masonry cracked, and in seconds, the region was thrown into chaos. For seismologists, it was the kind of quake the Caribbean-South American plate boundary is known for, but rarely with such intensity. Yet the story did not end there. Barely 6 hours later, before emergency crews could fully assess the damage, the same fault zone ruptured again. This time, the magnitude measured 6.3, deeper but equally destructive. Aftershocks rippled through the night, one reaching magnitude 5.8, forcing frightened residents back into the streets and leaving hospitals scrambling to operate on backup power. Geologists would later explain the sequence as a classic example of stress transfer, one fault segment slipping and loading strain onto the next. But the timing, arriving in the same narrow window as the stellar outbursts, made the earthquakes feel like part of a larger story. Across social media and scientific circles alike, people began to speak of a stack of events, sky and earth echoing each other with rare, almost impossible synchronicity. And still, the most unthinkable convergence was yet to come, waiting in the charged atmosphere of the sun. A solar storm meets an interstellar wanderer. Even as Venezuelans steadied themselves from the second quake, another drama was unfolding far beyond our atmosphere. On September 25th, the sun ejected a massive coronal mass ejection, a vast plume of plasma and magnetic fields racing outward at over 1 million miles per hour. Space weather agencies tracked the eruption carefully, but what caught their attention was its predicted trajectory. Models showed it brushing directly across the orbital path of 3IATLAS, the interstellar comet still carving its way toward the inner solar system. Solar storms hitting comets are not unheard of. In 2007, a CME tore past Comet Encke, shredding part of its plasma tail in real time. But never before had scientists had the chance to watch such an encounter with an object that came from another star system. For planetary scientists, it was the equivalent of running a cosmic experiment that no lab could ever stage, exposing unaltered interstellar material to the raw fury of the sun. For hours, observatories waited, combing through data from solar monitors and ground-based telescopes. The European Space Agency's Solar Orbiter and NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory fed back streams of measurements, each one narrowing the estimate of when and how the plasma front would cross paths with the comet. While no spectacular flare was visible to the human eye, researchers knew that within the comet's coma, atoms and dust were being slammed by a storm born 93 million miles away. To some, the moment felt symbolic, a visitor from another star, battered by our own. During the same week Earth trembled and distant suns flared. Coincidence, perhaps, or something that hinted at deeper patterns in the chaos. Stacking the odds, coincidence or pattern. By the end of September 25th, scientists and the public alike were confronted with a sequence of events that felt almost scripted. 2 naked-eye novae, twin earthquakes, and a solar storm colliding with an interstellar comet, each rare enough on its own, but together compressed into just 3 days. The natural response was to ask, what are the odds? Statisticians reached for a concept called Poisson clustering, a reminder that even in pure randomness, extraordinary clumps sometimes appear. Roll dice long enough, and improbable runs are inevitable. By that reasoning, the 72-hour stack might be nothing more than chance. Yet chance itself can be unsettling when the scale feels cosmic. For astronomers, the dual novae remain the most statistically jarring. Naked eye eruptions are expected perhaps once every year, or two. Two within 48 hours borders on unprecedented. Geologists, meanwhile, emphasize that quakes often come in pairs, one rupture stressing the next. And solar physicists note that CMES are frequent at solar maximum. Each piece can be explained, but the overlap refuses to feel ordinary. In research papers, the language is cautious: low probability, statistical outlier, rare concurrence. But outside the journals, the phrase event stack has already taken hold, spreading through newsrooms and conference chatter alike. Scientists resist mysticism, but even they admitted that in September 2025, nature seemed to bend the rules just enough to remind us how fragile our sense of certainty really is. The bigger picture, science at the crossroads. For researchers, the 72-hour stack was more than coincidence. It was a sudden concentration of natural experiments, each one pressing at the limits of human understanding. Astronomers found themselves scrambling to capture nova light curves before they faded, while seismologists raced to analyze fault-slip models as Venezuelan communities worked to recover. Solar physicists, meanwhile, tracked every ripple of the coronal mass ejection as it collided with 3IATLAS, knowing this was a chance that might never come again. The interstellar comet became the centerpiece of this convergence. Unlike local comets, its dust and gases carried the chemistry of another star system. Exposed to the storm of charged particles, its coma became a canvas for plasma physics, an unwritten page suddenly opened for study. Observations from orbiters around Mars, telescopes on Earth, and detectors in space all converged, building a record of how alien material behaves when battered by our sun. Yet, beyond the data, there was something larger at stake. These 3 days reminded us that Earth's story is inseparable from the wider cosmos. Quakes that split the ground, stars that erupted into brilliance, and a comet that traveled light years only to meet the violence of our sun, all converged within a single week. For scientists, it was an unmatched opportunity. For the rest of us, it was a moment to feel the scale of forces that shape our fragile place in the universe. 2 novae, 2 quakes, 1 interstellar comet. In 3 days, the cosmos reminded us how small our certainties are. When sky and earth align in such improbable chorus, all we can do is witness, record, and wonder.